The Counterfeit Wife, a Revolutionary War Mystery, Book 2, by Becca. Narrated by Nathaniel Priestley and Mia Hutchinson-Shaw. Prologue. Philadelphia, June 1780. His eyes fluttered shut once, then twice. He shook his head to clear it. He'd find himself waking in the gutter if he didn't go home now. He lurched past squat wooden buildings that had never seen better days. How had he come to this in less than a month? But he knew how. A flash of self-loathing gutted him. The Delaware River lapped against the docks to his left. A cart rumbled past him, the clip-clop of the horse's hoofs fading as it drew away. Two women argued nearby, their hoods pulled low over their faces despite the warm weather. And behind him, soft, tentative footsteps came close, then retreated. He sang a song to quiet the voices in his head. A-hunting we will go, a-hunting we will go. The voices had chased him from the tavern. So real they were that he'd whirled around, expecting to see someone. There was only the embankment behind Water Street looming out of the darkness, the street lamps high above long extinguished. The voices spoke of death. At the entrance of a nearby alley, shadows shifted. He quickened his pace, though his feet seemed to have lost interest in obeying his commands. What was he thinking, raising his voice in song on a street like this? He could get himself killed. As he passed the shadowy space, he heard a man grunt once, then twice more. A woman with a sharp face stepped out of the darkness, straightening her skirt. She glided by him, assessing and dismissing him in the same glance. His shoulder muscles relaxed. They had no interest in him. A-hunting we will go, hi-ho the derry-o, a-hunting we will go. Near the river, the voices melted away in a single moment. He faltered, his throat closing round his song. The sudden quiet felt ominous. Good luck doesn't last, but neither does bad, he mumbled. The man with the ruined hand had told him that. Bad luck don't last. He set off again, heading to the stairway that led to Front Street. His gaze caught something metallic flashing in the moonlight on the street. His steps slowed. A pox needle. He hadn't seen one since his days as a soldier. He shuddered at the sudden memory. There had been a prick and a few days of mild illness to prevent much worse. His focus widened, and he blinked hard, fixing his attention on the dark mound beside the needle. Not a mound. A man. The drunkard lay face down, his arms set as if he'd try to lift himself up before blacking out. The man's shoes were made of fine black leather. He wore a maroon evening jacket. A powdered grey wig and a velvety black pouch had tumbled and come to rest nearby. Almost losing his balance, he reached down to stroke the black velvet. Soft as a kitten's fur it was. It crinkled when he pressed on it. The groggified gentleman was taking a big chance coming here, especially with a bag as fine as that. Helltown was full of lunatics, criminals, and worse. He pressed harder on the velvet until the delicate corner of a paper bill peeked out the top of the cinched bag. Money. The pouch was full of paper money. The note had a black border. He couldn't see much more than that in the dark, even with the moonlight. He stuffed the slightly damp note back with shaking fingers, then pressed his thumb and pinky together. They were sticky. Shifting, he circled, then crouched for a better look at the drunkard. The man's cheek lay against the pebblestone street, and his light hair had come partially loose from the black ribbon that tied it back. A dark round gag filled his mouth. It shone wet in the moonlight. Fear shimmied up his spine and changed in a moment to fury. He fell, crab-walking away before righting himself. His voice shuddered to life in a sound that was part sob and part laughter. Out of the corner of his eye, he spied the long pox needle again. He scooped it up along with the black velvet pouch. Minutes later, having assured himself that the man was dead, He dropped one of the two items to the ground again. The other he kept.
Chapter 1. Philadelphia, 1 week earlier. Heat rose from Becca Parcell's chest, climbed her neck, and stamped a flush on her cheeks. She knew what would happen next. It was time for the toasts. "Steady now," Daniel Alloway whispered. They stood alone in a corner of the crowded ballroom. His good hand brushed hers for reassurance. His other hand hung at his side, deadened by the injury he'd incurred escaping from a British prison ship a year ago. Becca scanned the room to assure herself that no one watched them. Even his light touch was frowned upon by polite society, but it brought her warmth and comfort. Their host rapped an ornate silver fork against his crystal goblet again, and waited for the magpie chatter of gossip to quiet. He stood by the large fireplace, his feet planted wide as if he were standing on the deck of one of his ships. Mr. Thaddeus Barnes was the wealthiest merchant in Philadelphia, which meant, she knew, that he was one of the richest men in all of North America. Becca had rarely seen luxury like this, not even last winter in New York City. The ceiling dripped curved garlands of flowers carved of plaster. Blue and white vases from China rested on the carved marble mantel. Cherry wood tables hailed from France, and the glass chandelier from Venice. "I'd be much more comfortable with a bow in my hand," Becca murmured. "Or a knife. A knife would do." "You'd rather hunt in Morristown than here." Daniel smiled, his green eyes filled with amusement. The gaunt, haunted look he wore when she met him last winter was gone, but his features still seemed to be carved from stone, all hard angles and shadows, except when he smiled at her like this. Despite being tall, Becca had to tilt her chin up to see eye to eye with Daniel. "Hunting here will do," she said, sounding more prim than she intended, and Daniel laughed. "Even this type of hunting?" They were in Philadelphia, searching for the counterfeiters flooding the colony with fake money. They were the obvious, though unconventional, pair for the job, General Washington had said when he assigned them. Daniel, because he was a former printer with the skills to evaluate ink and paper, and Becca, for her talent with numbers, accounts, and codes, which had already served the general well. The clink-clink of metal on glass rang through the air again, and Mr. Barnes's guests finally quieted. "A toast," he called, beginning the first of the 3 he would raise to Becca and Daniel. It was the same at each of the parties held in their honor these past few weeks. Always 3. Becca dreaded the 3rd. "To independence." Becca lifted her goblet and sipped to a chorus of huzzas. 1, she counted to herself, because counting was soothing, but not soothing enough for what was to come. When the cheers faded, Mr. Barnes raised his glass again. The wine-filled cup glimmered red beneath the crystal candelabras. "To General Washington." "Huzzah!" The ballroom cheered again. 2, Becca counted. She should be grateful to Mr. Barnes, not gritting her teeth over his toasts. He had opened his home to them at the Washingtons' request, and he was introducing them to the finest families in Philadelphia, who were happy to welcome 2 friends of General and Lady Washington. At least that much was true. Since last February, she and Daniel had become regular visitors to the Washingtons' residence in Morristown after uncovering a plot that threatened the new nation. Another round of cheers. Some guests made the mistake of lowering their glasses. "And," Mr. Barnes crowed. A man, with ginger-colored hair lounging by the doorway, sighed loudly, catching her eye. Becca couldn't have agreed more. The stranger gave her a slow,